All right, welcome to the Apex Vaulting Podcast. First, I want to apologize. I said during Memorial Day weekend, I was going to do 2 episodes. I only did 1. I didn't get to it. I'm sorry. It's been a very busy spring. But if you do enjoy the podcast, please share it with a friend that you think would enjoy it. Also subscribe on YouTube. It's just Apex Vaulting, or you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy our content, we also have an Instagram page, just at The Real Apex Vaulting. We are also Apex Vaulting on Facebook and Twitter. If you have any comments or questions, please email us at apexvaulting@gmail.com. Love getting questions, love helping people out. So that's where you can reach out. And again, please share, subscribe, leave a comment. That would be great. This is episode 111. And today we have a guest. We have Ellie Fitzgerald. Ellie, do you want to tell them who you are?
I'm Ellie. I'm a senior in high school.
Yeah.
I've been pole vaulting for like 2.5 years, and
Okay.
I'm going to Williams College next year.
Yeah. You didn't graduate high school yet.
I have
Not
not
yet.
graduated high school yet. I have the latest graduation date ever. I graduate the 28th.
Okay. All right. So quick little background on Ellie. Like she said, she's in pole vaulting. She's a senior. She's going to be going to college next year. What's your PR?
12-1.
Okay. Before her first lessons in pole vault were actually here. We did the first couple of practices. I was super excited. I was like, oh man, this girl's gonna be really good. And then you had to tell me something.
I was moving to DC.
Washington, DC. I was like, oh damn. I'm like, that's gonna be a rough commute for her. Like coming up to practice all the time. No, but so anyway, go down to Washington, DC. I did recommend a club down there. You were jumping a little bit. Obviously, COVID happened, so it's not like you practice a lot. So, but you guys end up moving back to New Jersey, and you come back to the club. I kind of was just anticipating. I was like, all right, you must be jumping pretty high already. What was your PR when you came back?
A whopping 8.6.
Yeah, 8.6. So I was kind of shocked. But like I said, I mean, she wasn't jumping a lot, because of COVID and everything that happened. I don't know if everybody experienced that. But she comes back her junior year, and by the end of junior year, you get to 12 feet, which is phenomenal. And before we even get into that year and talk about some of the things that we did, I just want everybody to understand that is not super common. I think when pole vaulting clubs first start to spring up in an area, sometimes that is the norm, because you're getting these athletes that are jumping 8, 9, 10 feet on the girls' side, or 10, 11, 12, 13 feet on the guys' side without much coaching. And so you might get these big booms of a year like that, but it's not the common thing. I mean, I think now at Apex, for the most part, we get a lot of people that are coming in as beginners. So we're starting to coach them from the first steps. So it's like, yeah, obviously, well, obviously you have a huge PR the first year, right? Like if you jump 7 feet, that's a 7-foot PR. But, then it's kind of like just training and slowly chipping away. So that was a really, really phenomenal year. For you, what was it like going through that year, going from 8.6 to 12 for you? Like what were some of the things that you felt like you learned or discovered during that year and that process of PRing? Does anything stick out?
Well, it was the first time that I was disappointed PRing.
Wow.
That was an interesting one. So
okay.
I jumped 8.6 at DC Vault before I came. And then when we went back for the Halloween vault, I only jumped 9 feet.
Yeah,
and
only
I was
9 feet.
So disappointed.
Yeah.
And if I was jumping at the other gym back at DC Vault, I would have been perfectly happy because I PR'd, but I felt like I had improved so much technically.
Yeah.
That only a 1/2 foot PR really hurt.
Yeah. And I think definitely too, even that meet, because again, at that point, I think we had only been training maybe like 2 months or so. I knew that you were going to jump a lot higher, and I definitely knew that you had that kind of potential. But, sometimes like you go into a meet, I always feel like, especially first meet, it's like 50-50. If you hit things right, maybe you have a big PR. If you don't, you don't,
It was raining.
Did it rain that night?
It did rain.
Wow. Yeah. Gosh, I remember that day because Christina came down with us.
I wore Christina's spikes. That was the first time I ever put spikes on.
Right. Christina Langen, another person from the gym. She was a Division III All-American. So yeah, that was an interesting trip. And so then I think it was not too long after that, we had a meet here. You jumped 10.6, right? So it happened pretty quickly. You got to 10.6. Then, there was like a lull because there wasn't really like indoor season last year. What do you remember though, after 10.6 and before outdoors started, do you remember you no-heighted at a meet? Do you remember our conversation after you no-heighted?
Wait, I don't even remember no-heighting at the meet.
Yeah, we had a meet here, you no-heighted.
Oh, here, yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, do you remember our conversation? So Ellie's jumping, and like again, like she already jumped 10.6, but definitely was showing promise to jump higher, and she ended up no-heighting. Like it happens. And I remember you were looking at me and you were like, I think I get nervous at meets. And I go, do you know what makes people nervous or what makes them not nervous? Their level of preparedness, And I was like, if you're prepared, there's nothing to be nervous about. And I remember you looked at me, you were like, oh, that's not the answer I was looking for at the moment. So like at that moment, right? Like hey, at that meet, I tell you about being prepared. What did you take in from that conversation? What did that mean?
I guess I needed to work harder at practice.
Okay. What did that mean to you? Like, because I feel like, okay, everybody says work hard, but in that moment, what did that mean for you?
That I had to pay attention more to what I was like, instead of going on autopilot during jumps. Yeah. I had to pay attention to everything.
So, I mean, and basically through this podcast, we're going to be going over this like progression that Ellie went through and the different stages of like leveling up, because I think, and it was interesting today. I had a college practice at noon and I was talking to them. I was listening to a podcast, just some entrepreneur, and he was talking about like entrepreneurship and leveling up in business. And I think the thing that people think is like, oh, well, if I achieve X, then it'll get easier. Mm-hmm. That's not how anything works, guys. So for anybody out there listening, and like, I'm sure there's people, because like I literally, like, when you jump 12.1 from a 5, like some girl DM'd me that jumps like 11.6, and she was like, oh my God, how'd she do that? Right. So, for everybody listening out there who's like, yeah, I want to get to that level, or I want to, PR, or I want to have a big bust out year like Ellie did her junior year, going from 8.6 to 12. Here's the thing. There's never going to be a moment where then it gets easy. No, it requires another level up. And it's going to get more difficult, right? So, and the example I gave with the college crew, I was like, imagine if your only goal, like Ellie, just imagine if your only goal was to win a dual meet.
It's not very hard. Not
very hard, right? Like you wouldn't have to do much. Then like, okay, your county championship is not that hard. It's not super competitive, but let's say somebody wants to win counties, they're going to have to level up from just winning the dual meet. Then it's like, you want to win sectionals, you're going to have to level up even more, right? Like it gets more and more difficult. And I think for you, like, yeah, I think it's very easy, like you said, to go on autopilot, right? As an athlete, if you have good coaching and you're at a good club, I'm sure you can just like kind of go through the motions. The coach puts you at the right step, the right grip, and this and that. But then like, I don't know if you remember this. There was a moment where you were like, I don't think I can run anything past the 5.
I do remember that.
Yeah. And like talking about level of focus, it was like, wait, you can't just run down the runway. You have to think about how you run. Like walk people through that experience of like learning how to run. You know what I mean? Like explain that a little bit.
Well, it was crazy because at gymnastics, you just ran as fast as you could, no technique whatsoever, and went for it. And you have to be so precise on where you land every time that I struggled really hard with it.
Yeah.
Like I would go from a 5 and I'd be able to jump every time. And then I'd go back from a 6 and I'd run through every time.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of just getting consistent and focusing on how I run rather than just the speed at which I run it.
I would go even further. It's not just how you run, because obviously, like, we can make the rest of this podcast just about frontside mechanics, right? But running frontside, but it's not just about that. It's about setting up the run and opening up the run and making sure that you're going to be able to set up takeoff. Because even, I think I told you this year, like I got a phone call from a mom in Texas or whatever, has a daughter that is having run through issues, and she's a 12.6 vaulter. And I mean, that's good. Listen, I know there's like some 12-year-old girl jumping 15 feet somewhere right now. That's probably happening, but 12.6 is still really good. Okay. So it's like if a 12.6 girl is running through and the mom wanted to know my perspective on why I think that's happening. And I think a lot of times, like you described in gymnastics, like you just ran down, you didn't think about it. So the only thing you feel as the athlete is your foot speed. You're like, oh, my feet are moving quick enough. This must be good. But it's like, no, you can actually, like when you start to concentrate on front side running mechanics, setting up a run, opening up your run, and then setting up takeoff, now you have way more control. You have way more feeling and awareness. And that's going to prevent those run throughs. But it's like, it took that level of focus. So now, you're at 10.6 and you're realizing, wait, I have to focus more in practice. I can't just go autopilot, which that led to, well, do you remember the next big PR?
11.7.
Yeah. Was I at that meet?
You were not.
I was not at that meet. Can you explain how that happened?
So what was it? I don't remember what counties.
It must have been conference. I think it was the conference meet. Yep.
So it was the conference meet, and it was the first time I had jumped outdoors because I didn't have any partners, so I couldn't do any of the relays.
Yeah, because in New Jersey, a lot of the early season stuff, you need a relay partner. She doesn't have a relay partner, so she's got to wait for individual stuff.
Yeah, so I went, and the last time I had jumped, I don't know if you remember, I went to nationals.
Yes,
so I jumped 12.
That was indoors.
10.
Yeah, 10, 10. Yeah,
indoors 10. And so I was expecting like a little PR. I was like 10.6.
Yeah.
No, not 10.6, 11. Because I already jumped 10.
Right.
6. And I went and you coached me on a phone
through text. Yeah.
And I cleared 11 and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
That actually felt kind of good.
Right.
And then you're like 11.7. I was like 11.7. What is 11.7? I didn't even know.
Right, because in my mind, I was just like, let's go an inch above 11.6. It'll put you better in the state rankings.
And I was like, that's such a weird number. I was so new. I didn't even know what, like, this was like my first actual meet.
Right, like a legit,
legit high school
for
meet.
your high school, yeah.
And I had no idea what the rankings were or anything. But I cleared 11.7. And
yeah. So you had over a foot PR,
so I had a foot and 1 inch.
Yeah.
And that was crazy. That was really exciting.
Yeah, I still have that on my phone. I have that video, and I was like thinking about posting it, and not maybe after this podcast now I'll post it because people will maybe want to see the backstory. But yeah, I think also when you're being coached and you're not just on autopilot and you start to understand more and you start to understand the system and process that your coach is using, now things like being coached via text are possible.
Not that hard.
Yeah, it's not that hard. Like you put mid marks down for me. You had somebody record from the right spot and get the whole run and take off. And so I was able to give back feedback like, hey, upper grip back a half, or hey, you didn't jump up enough or whatever. And you were able to take that in, and that led to that 11.7 day. Where again, I think for everybody who's listening to this, who again is like, oh my gosh, I want to have a bust out year. I'd like to PR a foot, 2 feet next year.
But it wasn't even like that the whole season.
Right.
Do you remember what happened the next 2 meets?
Maybe not, but let me finish my thought and we'll go there. But like, so if you're looking for that bust out, like you need to understand how you're jumping a lot more, Are you talking about counties or?
The next 2 meets, I jumped well under 11.7.
I think you jumped 11.
11, but I might have even jumped 10.6 at one of them.
Yeah. Well, and this is where also you were doing other events and stuff like that. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the other thing too, is like, you're obviously going to have some ups and downs. It's not just, you know what I mean? Like you have a foot, an inch PR, like, well, you're not going to PR another foot the next meet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But if you hadn't told me that like not going straight up the entire time is fine, I would have been like, what is happening here? But I just wasn't that consistent yet. I mean, I am a lot more consistent this year than I was last year. And tiny things were messing me up. Like also, I never got down about anything. Like I kept practicing and I felt like I was still getting better, even though I was jumping worse, you might say.
Right. So like, okay, so you jumped that 11.7 day. Let's say you had a meet at 11, 10.6, whatever the case may be. Cause I think I do remember now. Yeah. We did have a 10.6, like before sectionals, but like, yeah, I think this is, again, from a coaching perspective, I think you have to do a good job of explaining stuff to your athletes about the process. And, there's this idea of like beginner gains in the lifting world. right? Like obviously when you're a beginner, you've never lifted before, your number is going to go through the roof. Like you might deadlift your first day only like 100 pounds. And then by the end of the 3 months, you hit 250. But that's like beginner gains. Now you're at kind of like a more realistic number. Now the percentage points that you're going to increase are going to lower, right? And this is normal. And I think the same thing happens in the pole vault. Like when you get those beginner gains, like when you went from 8.6 to 10.6, that's a big jump already. So we're not going to be PRing, 2 feet every single time now we go to a meet. Then it's like, okay, now you got to 11.7, that's a foot. But you see that's a decrease, right? Like we only PR'd by a foot instead of 2 feet now. And so then, let's talk about the 12-foot day, right? So you've been jumping now like 11.6 at the sectional and group meets. Walk us through that 12-foot day. Like, were you expecting 12 at Meet of Champs?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I was not, especially when I saw so many girls go through to 12. I was like, well, that's it. Like, I'm not placing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, no,
I'm shocked that you're saying that because first of all, as we go through this podcast, I have some stories about you and you are a very competitive person. So I can't believe you thought that's it. Like, I can't believe that.
I didn't think that's it. But my dad actually calls it, so in gymnastics, you only have 2 attempts at a ball.
Okay.
And so he calls my third jump my bonus jump.
Oh,
he yells out bonus jump. And so like, that's the way that like, I'm like, oh, like, that's how, like, it's a calm down, like a third jump.
Okay.
It's like, it's just a bonus try.
Right.
So like, do all the technique right. Don't worry about it because it's the last try. And I don't know. And when I went for the 12,
yeah. Well, so
I had some good attempts the first 2 attempts.
Oh, yeah. Well, so just to also explain, right, a little
like
bit.
6 hours of jumping. I was shaking.
Yeah, Meet of Champs was so long that year because I think there was like 40 something girls competing. We were also in South Plainfield. And I don't know what people would say, but I know the South Plainfield runway on the outside of the track is a little bit downhill. So everybody always gets on a little bit bigger poles, a lot of PRs.
That's
in
what you
South
told me. That's what I was hanging on.
Yeah.
Like you're like, you can PR at this meet because it's downhill.
Yeah. Well, but it's because I've seen it so many times. And it's so funny, right? Like that year, Ellie was hitting like 42, maybe a 43 mid on a really, really good run, right? And she comes down at this last attempt for 12 and she hit like 45.6. And I was like, oh no. I was like, that is way too far out. But you could just see like she kept the tip up, she's lefty. So she kept her right hand up. She didn't let the right hand drop and she stayed tall and jumped up on it. And I was like, and then, you cleared. It was amazing day, amazing jump. And definitely like a little bit like jumping out of your pants, like above expectation. So that was really awesome. I think you placed 4th or 5th? I don't remember. 4th. So 4th at Meet of Champs, really great result. And now what do you do? So, okay.
Oh my God. After that meet, I was like, that was so hard.
What do you mean?
Like I finished jumping and I didn't tell anybody, but I was like, there's no way I can jump any higher than that. Like that was so hard. It might have been the fact that I was jumping for 6 hours, but I was shaking and I was tired. But like, even like not being tired, like that jump felt hard. It was like, it felt like that was the best I could do.
Right. And I do think, so this is something that's interesting. I feel like a lot of times, like when I go to meets with athletes, like we're really always trying to squeeze it out. We're trying to get every inch out. And I think sometimes that's almost a negative, meaning like the way people watch us at meets, like from our club Apex, I think they see a lot of other people jumping and then, oh my God, that person can jump a foot higher. And maybe they can. But for me, I'm kicking myself when I go home. I'm like, I can't believe we didn't jump higher. And whereas like sometimes for us, like we're really like, we're getting every little bit of grip that we can get. We're getting on as big a pole as we can. We're bringing the standards in. We're squeezing out every inch on the runway.
You're clearing it by
and you're gonna clear that last bar by just a little bit. And it's like you're really squeezing it out for that day. Now, going back to earlier in this podcast, what I really liked was like, you were like, hey, I really realized after I jumped 10.6, I had to start to focus at practice and really understand the technique and really start to understand the system and level up from a technical standpoint and a mental standpoint. What would you say going into the summer? What was the next level up? Like, what did we add there?
During the summer, I realized that I wasn't eating right and that I needed to start lifting. So I was almost getting weaker because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I definitely peaked. I was a level 9 gymnast, so I was strong before going into it, and I was not getting stronger. So I think towards the end of the season, I was almost getting weaker.
Right, and I think, look, like you said, you're a level 9 gymnast. You came in great shape. You're definitely strong, like for like the average person, like very strong, and you just needed to learn technique. But you're getting to kind of the end of like what your natural or like let's say gymnastic abilities could get you, and now it's like the training needed to start, and that started to become important. I think also, what I love about here in the culture is like you look around, there's always someone doing something crazy. Like I'm sure for you it was inspirational to watch someone like Alexis or Kendra who are already lifting, and like Kendra's doing an 80-pound pull-up, and you're like, I guess that might be something I need to do, and so I think the first step was like you were really starting to lift a lot. And I remember we went to an early season summer meet where you jumped from a 5 and you almost jumped like 11.6 or 11.7. I think
And
it might
I
have
was
been
gripping the same thing I did from a 12, and I was only like 1 or 2 pulls down. Too.
Yeah, from a 5. So I was like, oh my God, we're gonna knock Summer out. Like this is gonna be ridiculous, right? And later that summer, so it must have been like at least 2-3 weeks down the road.
Beach Vault.
Yeah, we go to Jersey Beach Vault in Atlantic City. And I'm watching you jump, and I had been noticing for a couple weeks at practice. I'm like, I don't know, like Ellie just looks lethargic now. And I warned one of my high school kids yesterday, Christian, don't forget. I said, you know what ruins summer training? Sleep. Because so many high school kids, right? Like during the school year, it's like they're in bed by 10, 11, I hope. And then, they got to wake up early for high school, and they're kind of a little bit more regimented with their sleep. And then summer hits, and, the first couple of weeks, you're like, well, I don't have to go to bed at 11. Maybe, I get to sleep in. So I'll play a little bit of video games, or I don't know, Snapchat with somebody. I don't know what the hell people are doing, right? But they're staying up later. And midnight slowly turns into 1 a.m., 1 a.m. turns into 2 a.m. Now you're sleeping in. So mathematically, you're like, no, but Bronco, I'm getting 8 hours. I'm telling you, if you're listening, getting 8 hours of sleep from 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning on is not the same as if you went to sleep at 10 o'clock. It's just not. So who knows? I'm like, in my mind, like maybe Ellie's not going to get good sleep. Like that's possible. But we get to beach vault, and I'm just like, man, like it looks so hard for her to run down the runway. And that's when we had the nutrition talk. So, and listen, I think there's a lot of people in the pole vault community that I don't think about weight and nutrition properly. Their first thought is like, you got to get lighter. Everybody's always like, you got to get lighter. Don't wait. I literally got a DM from a former professional pole vaulter who was like, no, if you get too strong in pull-ups and you gain weight, you're going to jump lower, which I'm telling you, it's nonsense. But anyway, what was our conversation about nutrition? Do you remember?
It's mostly focused on protein intake. So I had started lifting, but I wasn't replenishing anything because I was eating
just normal,
whatever I wanted to eat.
Yeah. And it's like, it wasn't a talk about eat less. It was more kind of like eat more. You need to make sure you're increasing your protein intake. One of the things that we talk about at the club is like, roughly 80% of your body weight in grams of protein. So if you weighed 100 pounds, which most people don't, but imagine just for easy math, you weighed 100 pounds, you need 80 grams of protein, which all of a sudden, again, you go through that math on your daily intake. It's like if you did an egg for breakfast, that's 7 grams. Okay. Let's say you eat a sandwich with meat in it. Maybe that's 20 grams. You're at 27. Let's say you eat a whole chicken breast for dinner. You're only up to 57 grams. You're over 20 grams off, right, from what you need if you weighed 100 pounds. Never mind now, if you don't weigh 100 pounds, you need more than that. So it's like that starts to become a thing that you have to really concentrate on. And I'm sure at the beginning it must have been hard, right? Was that like work just to eat enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
to not get bored of what you're eating.
Yeah. So again, this idea of leveling up, it's going to get harder every step. Like, it's so funny. Sometimes people are like, but Bronco, I can't eat more. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And again, for all those people out there like, well, I don't want my pole vaulter to gain weight. Guys, The only way your vaulter is going to gain bad weight is if they're eating ice cream and pizza all the time, which, shocker, doesn't have a lot of protein. So that's not what I'm talking about. If you're eating healthy and you're eating protein, it is literally you will not want to eat more. You know, you're going to get to that point. And I think that's the next level up is like, okay, I'm eating because I'm an athlete and I need this so that I can perform. And I think, what was it, like 2-3 weeks after that talk, again, the performance started to come back. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was like surprisingly like exactly after that 2 or 3 week mark, I even just practice got a lot better.
Yeah. Because I mean, we'll next go into her fall training and what really happened this year that kind of threw, a wrench into everything. And we had to kind of scramble, but I wouldn't even call it scrambling. I mean, we just did what we needed to do. But like, I think it's funny because I could tell even like, you were disappointed at beach ball and I'm having this protein talk with you and your mom. And I was talking about it and I could see even in your eyes, you're like, I don't know, I guess I'll try it. But like, this is kind of sounding like bullshit to me. And right. It's like, it's so crazy. And then it's like 2 weeks on the dot, 3 weeks on the dot. It was like, all of a sudden you're starting to get on really big poles in practice. It's getting easier to jump. The lifts are getting easier because now you actually fueling your body, So do you remember in the fall what poles you started getting on from a 5 even?
I don't.
Oh, see, this is why,
I don't pay attention.
guys, I have these clipboards, right? And I write everything down. Plus I have a crazy memory. So you were starting to get on like 1340, 45 from the 5, which going back to the year before, you jumped 12 on the 1345. Yeah, from a 7. And now she's getting on these from a 5. I'm like, oh man, this is, we're going to kill it, And now you also did something else in the fall. Do you remember?
High school gymnastics.
And so now here's the thing. Like, I'm personally a little bit crazy with my training. A lot of it doesn't even make sense. As Lily was telling someone tonight, she's like, I think Bronco just likes to feel like he's dying when he works out. And a lot of times I push it and I create injuries for myself, I actually haven't sprained my back in a long time, but it's not uncommon. I think last time I sprained my back was actually like a year ago next week because I was doing this summer camp.
Not that often. Just once a year. More than once a year.
Once a year is not bad. But anyway, so I remember
just
one
feel the
time.
Spaghetti snapping a little bit.
Yeah. I have all right, we don't need to say it. But anyway, so like I remember one time specifically like deadlifting and I was coming back from injuring my back and Ellie's like watching me. She's like, you really shouldn't do another set. Like you should be careful. And I'm like, Ellie, don't worry. Right. And I didn't get hurt that night. But anyway. Then all of a sudden I start to notice like halfway through fall, I'm like, man, like I feel like she's favoring one side, this is not, and this is where as a coach, you have to pay attention. Athletes aren't going to always tell you when something hurts. You have to pick up on these like little things, like if somebody's getting off the mats and they're grabbing a certain body part or you know what I mean? Like, it's like, maybe their shins hurt, maybe the hamstring's tight or whatever. I'm always kind of watching this. I say, Ellie, is everything right? Yeah, no, I'm fine. Yeah, no, I'm fine. And you're like, and then finally.
I think I told you that it hurt, but only if I stepped on
what hurt?
My ankle.
Okay.
But I was like, but if I step on it the right way, it doesn't hurt. It only hurts if I step on it the wrong way.
And I was like, Ellie, I think I'm rubbing off on you too much. I'm like, you're starting to sound like me, I'm like, you sure? And I was like, dude, we should take some time off. Nope, I'm good. She kept going. And well, I mean, you had a great gymnastics season, right?
I made it to states.
Yeah.
Even though I was out of gymnastics for 2 years.
Right. Yeah. And normally it's like the only girls that make it to New Jersey State meet at the high school level are club gymnasts. It's people that are spending like hours and hours. How many hours a week do club gymnasts spend in the gym?
Like
a week. 20 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, she had a great season. But now your foot's starting to bother you. Really, really hurts. So I feel like it was like end of November, beginning of December, we had to stop vaulting.
I think I stopped like the week before winter break because then I took winter break as like a break.
Right. And Then in January, we still didn't jump. So we're not jumping. It's January, winter track started. We're not jumping at all. At all. So she ends up not jumping at all. She did jump like one practice and we went to one meet. Yeah, sectionals, then didn't jump. And then we still didn't jump after that. Now, here's the thing, fast forward, because we're going to go back to what happened during that time period. But she's got this injury, ends up being, we find out it was a stress fracture, was going to become a stress fracture, whatever it was. But she had this injury in her ankle. She still ends up PRing, jumping 12-1. I mean, it's a small PR, but PRs are PRs. She jumps to 12-1. She jumps 12 at meet champs. You end up placing second in the state. How, right? Because I'm sure people listening out there have either coached an athlete that's had to go through something like this, or they are an athlete that may go through this or have gone through this. How do you end up having an injury and basically missing December, January, February, and
like
March?
4 or 5
right?
months I was out.
Yeah.
Because I never fully stopped.
Right. But you don't jump and you still end up PRing and then doing well at the state meet. How do you end up doing that? Well, for one, my big advice to everybody all the time with injuries, is like, you don't want to ever completely stop everything. Obviously, whatever hurts, don't do what hurts, right? But you could typically find either a range of motion that doesn't hurt, exercises that don't hurt. Obviously, like this was an ankle injury. It doesn't hurt? Pull-ups. Pull-ups don't hurt your ankle. It's weird. So you can kind of work around the injury and make sure the rest of your body is as strong and fit as possible so that when you do come back, you can start at a higher level. I think the worst thing that anybody could ever do is they just completely take off, stop working out at all. Some people even talk about for people concerned about diet, they throw their diet out and start having ice cream pizza all the time because they're like, whatever, I'm not training, or I think even on the flip side, some people end up getting way too skinny. Like they completely lose their muscle mass, right? And so now when you come back, oh, good luck. I don't know what poles you're getting on, but they're not going to be the same. What did you do instead? You didn't just, I don't even remember you missing like a week of practice. Walk us through what a week was like for you.
So I still came to every practice and
Right.
I'd get here and I think I might have done pole drops.
Right. Yeah, you definitely did pole drops.
So I did pole drops, I stretched, pole drops, and then I go to the back by myself and I lift for the whole practice. And so I do deadlifts, pull-ups, and bench.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I'm sure you did like leg lifts and stuff like that.
No, and core stuff and stuff. But my main were like deadlift, pull-ups, and bench. Yeah.
And so it's like those were things that didn't hurt her, kept her strong. I also think, not for nothing, I think if we want to talk about, I hate talking about the mental aspects sometimes because people jump to mental stuff. But I think mentally, psychologically speaking, I think just continuing to be around a training group, continuing to be around the sport in some level and fashion is really motivating. You know what I mean? Because you come in, you're like, wow, it's like,
I didn't feel like I had missed out on practice.
Right. Well, certainly not physically. You were training your butt off. But I think also it's like you still get that camaraderie with the people they train with, like Calvin, Lily, Alexis, whoever. And it's like you stay involved, and it's on your mind. Because I think when you just step away, your mind can go off to a million different other things. You could all of a sudden start being like, well, should I even do this anymore? Maybe I should just quit. Yeah, I could just quit, Whereas this is inspiring and motivating. I think the other thing is too, obviously here we have had plenty of athletes over the years who have gone through injury issues, like you practice with Lily. Lily's had injury issues. And so you could talk to someone like her and she'd be like, hey, this is how I got through it. This is what I did when I had a similar issue, maybe not it's the same exact injury, but just not being able to pole vault, and I don't know. What do you think? How did that help you just even from the psychological perspective?
Well, I even looking back at it now, I'm still, I guess because I never stopped going to practice, I felt like I needed to get better. Because I never stopped, my mindset was still I can't get worse. Like when I got
Right.
back into things, I was like when I got back into like actually competing,
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, there was no reason why I should be jumping lower than I was before
Right.
because I never stopped. And maybe I didn't get better in my technique aspect, but I got stronger. So I was like,
Well,
I
I think the technique did get better.
I did zeros.
Yeah. So, I mean, for those of you that don't know, zeros, you start with the pole in the box. There's no running. So it's not going to hurt her ankle.
Did it in a boot.
Yeah. And she could just, use her upper body and work through the jump upper body wise. So I feel like even in some ways, not saying it's good that you get injured, but the positives you can take away is like, okay, now you can hyper focus on these other things that you wouldn't ever spend this much time at this basic fundamental drill.
Mhm.
And now you can, because you can't do anything else. So it's like, I felt like a lot of times, like your technique actually did improve. I think if anywhere the place, and we kind of talked about it a little bit tonight, was like, maybe your run wasn't there, you know what I mean? Because you couldn't run, and even once you started jumping, I mean, we had to be very careful with your foot because a little bit too much and it would start to hurt again, but I think those are all good points. I mean, that motivation of being like, okay, well, I got to be ready when it's time to come back,
Mhm.
So now, do you remember your first meet?
Yes,
What
I do.
approach you ran from?
A 4.
Yeah.
I ran from a 4 and I cleared 11.
Yeah. You
But I
jumped
was pretty
11.
close at 11.6.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. And so again, for people listening, I think the mistake that you can make is going too fast too soon. Meaning, like, if you go to someone's first meet, they've been out for a while. Listen, I don't care what level they're at. I don't care what their PR is, but you don't have to do a full approach. And a lot of times, if I don't know, I feel like imagine we tried a 7 first meet out.
I would not have been able to get the steps right for one.
Well, yeah, I think that would have been really hard. I think also the thing is like, let's say because the run fell off or whatever, and now I think it'd be a lot harder to get on a big enough pole from a 7 right off the get, because I think you jumped 11 with like a 13.30 or 35 from a 4, and so it's like you're not going to jump 11 on a 13.35 from a 7. That's just not going to happen. So you might not catch up on poles, and now you jump from a 7. Let's say you jump 10 or 10.6. You'd be like, wow, I'm way off. Whereas 11 from a 4, you're like, holy shit, I go back a left, I'm going to go at least 11.6. I go back out, right? You start doing mental math. You're like, this is adding up. This makes sense. I mean, how did you feel after jumping 11 from a 4?
I mean, it felt good to get back into things, but I was like, I should have jumped higher. I don't know. No, I mean, I guess it was just because I got so close to that 11.6.
Right.
That I really wanted to get it. But I mean, it was definitely encouraging that I cleared like a good bar.
Right.
Because I was worried that I'd come back and be like, what is pole vaulting?
Right.
But no, it was, and a 4 was good because it wasn't that far back to what I've been doing in practice. I had done some 2s. I think I did 1-3 before the meet.
Yes.
And so I could figure out the plant. It took me a second to get the plant back, but I mean, it was exciting.
Yeah. Well, and I think a couple things from there. I mean, I think one, that idea of like, oh my God, did I forget how to pole vault, right? Like, I feel like people are always nervous in the pole vault because it's such a technical event. And I think also, like, going back to the example of like people who run through a lot and stuff like that, who maybe are not very conscious and aware of the run and the takeoff. I think if you're one of those people that kind of jump in the dark, it's very easy to be like, oh my God, I can't take off anymore. I'm just going to run through all the time. Well, those people don't really know what they're doing, and they're probably always or almost always doing full approaches. That's not much of a process. So either you can do it or you can't.
Yeah.
Whereas like by being able to do shorter stuff, and like you said, you had only done a 3 at practice. That was the furthest approach you did before that first meet, going to a 4. We didn't do anything further back. And I think the rest of the season, the furthest you jumped from in practice was a 4.
Yeah.
I don't think we even did a 5, right?
No, and I did like 1 or 2 4s.
Yeah, like 4 left session or 4 right sessions. But like, yeah, I mean, when you have a process like that, you don't have to do the full, right? You don't have to do your full approach. You don't have to be trying to PR, but you have training numbers. Like, you knew your pull-ups were awesome. You had hit 75-pound pull-ups, I know you weren't maybe happy with your deadlift numbers, but they were kind of improving, they're getting there. Then you also know what grips and pulls you're getting on from these shorter approaches, which you know are going to yield X number when you go back. So you kind of have these numbers where it's like, yeah, maybe until you actually do it, you're not 100% sure, but you're like, okay, like I'm not going to jump 9 at the meet.
Yeah.
You have an idea. So you jumped 11 from a 4. Then the next meet we go back to a 5, which how did that go?
Is that the 12-1 meet?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That went really well.
Yeah. Well, do you want to describe that at all? Like, do you want to explain it? Give it your spin?
Well, I went back to a 5, and I got on the same hole and the same grip that I jumped 12 the year before. And I cleared 11.6, and I went back and I was like, 11.6 is better than I did last week.
Right.
But I was like staring at the 12, and I was like, but I would not be happy if I went home
jumping
11.6. And I went and I jumped 12-1. 12-1. And I think I was more excited to jump 12-1 this time than I was at Meet of Champs, because I had come back. And I for a long time in the middle, like when I was injured, I felt like a fraud. I was like, I don't jump 12 feet. Like everybody knows me as like the 12-foot jumper, but like I don't know if I can jump 12 feet anymore. And so when I jumped 12 from a 5, I was like, okay, so it all paid off. Like all the lifting and the small technique work paid off. And it was a big confidence boost, if nothing else.
Yeah. Well, and I think, look, for everybody listening, you can't ever guarantee results, right? Or especially like when they're going to happen, right? Because a lot of times, like you're putting in work, you don't get the result. You're putting in work, you don't get the result. You're putting in work, you don't get the result. And you want to give up. But the thing is, if you can keep pushing, it all will work out in the end. If you could keep your foot on the gas and just keep grinding, it will work out. You have to kind of have faith in the process that it's going to work out. And I totally get what you're saying about like feeling like a fraud, like when you jump 12 the first time, because I think sometimes people can kind of get on a roll and certain things happen. But especially if you're not like, kind of like when you were talking about the run, right? Like in gymnastics, you just ran down, you didn't know what happened, right? It's like, well, if you don't actually know what you did to accomplish a goal,
Can you replicate it?
Yeah, you can't copy it because you don't have the recipe. Like I always use the example of people, it's like imagine like you didn't measure anything out, you didn't have a recipe book, you just kind of like just threw stuff together and wow, dinner turned out phenomenal. The problem is, how do you recreate that? You didn't measure anything out, you don't have a recipe to follow, you just threw stuff together. You have no idea if you could do that again, right? Whereas like when, especially I think this is where coaching comes in like huge. Coaches need to have that recipe book. You have to have that coaching recipe book so you can say to your athlete, no. We have the recipe. We know how this jump is created. This is how you do it, Obviously, I think, it was awesome too to PR from 5, you know what I mean? Which that showed great promise. And then, we get to Meet of Champs. Well, why don't you talk about Meet of Champs?
It was so windy. That's what I'm going to take. That's not the only thing I'm going to take away from Meet of Champs, but I was feeling pretty confident going into Meet of Champs because everybody else, there were 4 of the jumpers who jumped 12, but I felt like I had 12 down. Like by now, I mean, I hadn't consistently jumped 12, but I consistently jumped 12.6, and I knew
12.6, 11.6.
Sorry, I've got a number thing. And I felt that I could jump 12.
Yeah.
But then I showed up and it was so windy. And we had talked about the week before going from a 7. And we didn't even talk about it in warm up. I just went from a 6 just because I had done it. I'd only done it twice now.
Warm-ups were pretty hectic.
Yeah.
We were not going to have time to really go back to a 7 and try it. And especially I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, if you tried it and it didn't work, we're definitely not going to have time to go back to a 6. And then we're going to take too many jumps. And I'm just like, let's just stay at a 6.
Because I hadn't had any experience at a 7 since Meet of Champs the year before.
Right.
But oh my goodness, then the 11-foot, that nearly gave me a heart attack.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was interesting, right? Because you came down, I mean, huge blow through at 11. We ended up going up a grip, back a half, up a pole. So you went to the 13:45 and you were gripping 12. Then you come down, you had huge height and you nicked it on the way down.
Then I was on my third attempt at 11.
Yeah.
And I was one gust away from
right,
one
because
gust
it
of
was
wind away.
yeah, like if the wind takes the pole and stuff like that, which I mean we had talked about in warm-ups, even like, hey, try to keep the tip a little bit lower, and really you got to make sure you're gripping the pole with that bottom hand so you can like fight the wind. The other thing from my coaching perspective, like when you had that much height and you nick it on the way down, I mean, like, sure, I could move the standards in, which we did. But then it's also like, well, you can still come down on it again. But it's like, how much do you grip down? Because it's like a lot of times you grip down and then the person blows through. So I think we gripped down 2 fingers, which obviously like you ended up clearing 11 with that.
Yeah.
You know, which even like, and you remember I told you, I was like, listen, you got to like keep working through the whole jump. Part of the reason you even came down on it on the second attempt was like, you didn't pull through the turn. You kind of just were letting go, you know? But that was a relief at that point.
It was a big relief.
Yeah.
And then 12.6 on the first attempt.
11.6.
Oh my God.
This girl.
I swear I can't do numbers.
Tomorrow she's gonna tell people she jumps 14.6.
Yep. I got 11.6 on the first attempt.
Yes.
And then I came onto 12, and the girl before me cleared on the first attempt.
Yes, she cleared on the first attempt. And at this point, we're probably down to the last 5 or 6 girls in the competition. So you definitely medaled. But you know, obviously, you know, I think we had certain ideas in our head about how you could finish. So we already know, like, now this first attempt at 12 is important.
Is very important.
Yeah.
And I went and I felt like I was way over it. And I hit it on the way down.
Yeah, nicked it on the way down, so we got a miss. So already now in my head, I'm like, oh man, we gotta jump, you know, 12.6. You got a PR,
Yeah.
you know. So you know, that at that point, I think I brought the standards all the way into 18. You know, second attempt to come down on it again. So now
You told me to grip down half of a finger.
literally, I'm like, listen, I can't have her blow through, but I gotta help this pole move a little bit. I'm like, grip down a half a finger. And I remember there was like some boy on the boys pit, like he definitely like looked at me like
I looked at you like, what?
I'm like, dude,
half
just a half a finger. That's it.
I was like,
just a smidge, just a smidge.
This little tiny.
Yeah. And you cleared.
Still hit it on the way down.
You still did hit it
Still
on the
did.
way down. You still hit it on the way down. But you cleared, and it's on Instagram if you didn't see. Slow motion.
Very
And
exciting.
yes, no, I mean, I love your reactions. You always get fired up, and I think, you know, it was funny. Speaking about being fired up, and then we'll get to the finish of this meet. But like, I remember someone yesterday was like, Bronco, do you get excited to go to meet a champs, or is it just like not important to you? And I go, you know, it's funny that you asked me that. Because it was like Saturday morning, I was driving to the club to pick up the poles. I had like packed them already. I just needed to put them on my truck. And so like I'm driving to the club, and you know, like I was like, you know, you feel stuff in your belly, you know? And I'm like, yeah, like, I mean, I get it. It's high school state championship. In the whole grand scheme of things, it's pole vault, it's track. It's not right. Like, it's not that big a deal. I get it. But if it's not important to you, why are you doing it? And it is. It's just important. I get excited. I also, even like, let's say on some level, if I was like, well, you know, it's not important to me. I've coached these meets so many times. I know how important it is for her. I know how important it was for Alexis, for Rob, you know, who were at the meet, Kyle, right? Casey, yeah, Casey was there. You know, I know how important it is for them, you know, and I know what I'm about to say sounds a little bit corny, but I think it's so true if you're a good coach. The most important person in the world is the person who's on the runway at the time. Period. So like, you know, you bring up Casey. Yeah, when Casey was jumping at 9, that was very, very important. you know, because I know how much it means for her, right? Like for you, 9 feet would not mean that much. But for Casey, 9 feet is important. 9'6" is important. 10. When she jumps 10, oh my God, it's like that's gonna be a party. You know what I mean? Like, because it's important for her. And for you, States is important, you know? So it's like even, you know, still driving to that meet that morning, I was, you know, definitely super excited, you know.
I just got bit. One of my dad's favorite things about you is your reactions after every single jump. My dad watched the video of me jumping 12 and he was looking at you. He was like, Bronco knew it stayed on before it even stopped bouncing. Yeah. He was already celebrating.
Yeah.
Or even when I missed, it's like
Yeah.
And he loves to watch your reactions because you do care about every jump.
Yeah, well, tell him I said thank you. But like, I mean, that to me, I mean, like, again, if you don't, you know what I mean? Like, and listen, I get it. A lot of people love to use the iPad, but like one of my pet peeves is this, right? I'll see these coaches. They're like, first of all, they're not even actually like live watching the jump. They're just like iPadding it, regardless of clear or miss. Is there anything more like anticlimactic? You know what I mean? Like what? Like, you know, like for me, it's always like, look, you should get somebody else in video. You got to have some kind of reaction, something to say to the athlete afterwards. And then if you have to go check that video again, and then, you know, I've never really felt the issue of like checking the video, maybe if I feel the need to, and then be like, hey, you know what? Let's actually do this instead. Let's make that, you know, I mean, obviously it's not wildly different. It's not like, did I say go up a pole? I meant go down 2, you know, like it's not something crazy like that. But, you know, so I think you gotta be up for it. So then for 12.6, I mean, because the standards were 18. I'm kicking myself now because obviously hindsight is 2020 and what we didn't work. But
it was the right move. It just didn't.
I think it made logical sense. Like we tried a 7, went back to a 7 to try to get on a bigger pole, you know, because I don't know that we would have gotten on a bigger pole from a 6 because again, standards were 18. She came down on 12. Again, there is that thought process of like, you know, it's like a little like quantum mechanics or quantum physics, a little bit of string theory. You can maybe grip down 2 fingers, you blow through and then go up a pole. Like maybe. There's a slight possibility.
And I'd just be doing like an 18-inch push off. It'd be no issue.
I think that would be awesome. But anyway, so we go back to a 7. It didn't work. You placed second. How'd you feel? Yeah. I was a little bit pissed myself too. But the thing is too, and I think, so because I'm going to go back in time now. I don't know if you remember this. I apologize. Don't be embarrassed. But a couple Sundays prior, you know, you had jumped 12.1 like about like a month ago, whatever. And you practice on a Sunday with Kendra. She's one of my college girls, jumps 11 3/4. By the way, please, for all the metric snobs out there, I don't know why we do everything in metric. It's ridiculous. I can't believe people have to jump at 11 3/4 or 14.11 or whatever. All the way up. This happens. And then also for all you, well, metric, that's how okay. Do you know your steps in metric or feet and inches? I would love to know, please. I will take it back. If you use a metric tape measure for your run, sure, go more power to you. But anyway, so you're practicing with Kendra, who is like, I don't know what you think, but she's like a Terminator. I swear, I told her brother, I've never seen Kendra upset at practice. I cannot recall. I mean, like, obviously, like, I remember when she was a freshman and she only jumped 8.6 as a freshman in high school. And like, you know, but she's never had a practice where I was like, oh my God, that was God awful. I don't know what happened to her today, but it was always kind of like just chipping away, like steady progress. And you practice with Kendra, and I feel like you got lit up. Like she really she looked good. How did you feel after that practice?
That was the practice where I think she was jumping for like 45 minutes after me because I just did not have a good day.
Yeah.
So I cut it early and lifted.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think you had a fine day, and I told you it was better than practice before.
But it was not Kendra's practice.
No, it was not Kendra's practice. But do you remember what you said to me after you finished? You were very upset. I've never seen you this upset at practice, by the way.
Oh,
You almost started crying.
I do remember, but I don't remember what I said.
So, I mean, you said to me, you were like, I think I messed up. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Because I didn't lift. That was it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you had a couple practices where like they just, weren't up to par. You may have cut out on lifting,
It was like a few practices.
Yeah.
I had missed like 2 practices and then I didn't lift on 2 practices. And I was like,
Right.
I screwed up.
Yeah, like I messed up the last 2 weeks. And, what I had said to you was I was like, listen, like, I don't have a time machine. We can't go back in time.
I do remember this exact
Yeah.
conversation.
And what I said to you, I was like, look, like, we can't fix the last 2 weeks. If you feel like you took your foot off the gas pedal or maybe felt a little too overconfident after jumping 12-1, that's something that you have to learn from now. But like all you could do now is like today was better than your Thursday practice because it was a Sunday. And I'm like, you got to make sure Tuesday's better than today and Thursday's better than Tuesday and just keep trying to get better every week going forward. And that's all we could focus on.
You can fine tune. I think you said something along the lines. You can fine tune what you have now, or you can let it all go.
Yeah, you could just give up. We could always, if we get upset, we could just give up. But that doesn't fix the problem, you know? And I think this is where it's like also from a coaching perspective, like Ellie, you have no idea. Like maybe a little bit, but like you have no idea. Like if this was like 5-10 years ago, I would have been very unreasonable that day. I would not have been a good coach. Like, because I would have probably like lost my shit. I would have been like, I knew it. Like, you got to be training harder. I would, if you thought you were upset that Sunday, yeah, I would have pushed the buttons even more, you know? And the thing is, like, I think this is where as coaches, we have to learn that these, you know, again, it's like cliche and corny, like these are the teachable moments, you know what I mean? Like where now, and, you know, and I've been thinking about this for weeks now, since that day is, this is where it's a learning opportunity for you. And one, I already saw you were upset. I don't need to make you more upset. I need to make you feel better so that you continue working hard and try to salvage what you can, you know, which I think we did, you know, and I think all things considered, the injury she dealt with, the months that she couldn't jump, everything that she did, I think one, PR and jumping 12-1 from a 5 is huge. That's a good sign for the future for her. Then placing second, and not just placing second, but you had some clutch jumps. Like we just outlaid, she almost missed 11. She did that third attempt. Then you cleared 12 third attempt. That's clutch. You jumped from like whatever, 5th or 6th all the way up to 2nd. Would I have loved to see you win? Sure. Would you have loved to win? Yes. And I've got a story about how much she cares about winning in a minute. But like, hey, that was awesome. Now, what I think the bigger takeaway from this, and I've been thinking about this since Saturday, what to tell you, you know, is in life, sometimes we have a window of opportunity for things, right? Like you have a window of opportunity and that window of opportunity never comes back, right? Like you're not going to be at high school states next year. Yeah. Like that was it. That's all she wrote. Now, I mean, in a perfect world, you would have lived in New Jersey all 4 years. And in a perfect world, COVID didn't happen. In a perfect world, I would be 6'4". No, but anyway, so it's like, sure, I would have loved to have more time coaching you. You know what I mean? But we have these windows of opportunity and we have choices to make during those windows of opportunity. So for people that are listening, and listen, you were good with a lot of stuff, but there are kids who maybe they have prom, go down prom weekend. Maybe they go to this party, that party at the end of the year because it's senior year. And then it's like, and then you jump like garbage at Meet a Chance, which you did not jump like garbage at all. But like, there's people that make those choices and it's like, you have that small window of opportunity. Now you may look back and be like, maybe those 2 weeks, if I, you know, like, okay, but this is what I'm going to say. Because she's going to Williams next year, Division III. She got a 12-1 PR. Certainly you have 4 years. certainly
Negative D3 nationals.
make it. You better be an All-American at least one time, at least one time, at least. And if you really bust your ass, if this is something you're interested in, it's definitely possible 4 years to be a national champ. This year, 12-11 won. Right? Depending on the year. Now, if you get a string of years, because it's possible, D3 has done this, where you get like, there's like 13-6, 13-9, 14-foot girls, that's going to be a little bit tougher. But still, I don't think out of the question. It's not crazy. You got 4 years. People don't understand. When you have a 4-year block.
I've only been here for like a year and a half.
Right. And when you have a 4-year block, do you know how much you could transform your body? How much better your technique can get? You know, and then, I mean, you're certainly a gamer, right? So just to tell you a story, this is hysterical. So remember, during that like 4 or 5 month period, no jumping, she had one practice before state sectionals indoors, because this is before we got the MRI result on your ankle saying that, I mean, the doctor thought it was the beginning of a stress fracture. I tend to believe it was the end, but regardless, whatever it was, there was or was going to be a stress fracture in the ankle. Before we find out, we go to sectionals.
So I'd have the chance to continue competing
Yeah.
if I wanted to.
Right. If there was opportunity, and then, you know, whatever. So I was at sectionals all weekend, you know what I mean? Because it's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday at the Toms River Bubble in New Jersey, right? And at the Toms River Bubble, you can only wear 1/8 inch spikes. You can't wear quarters. Me, knowing kind of like just everything I've been through, definitely people are going to be watching my athletes, whether they're wearing the right spikes. And me knowing that Ellie's never been in Toms River before, I'm like, I know she doesn't know this, and she's going to show up with quarters, and then it's going to be a hassle at section. We're going to be like running, scrambling to get the right spikes in. So I text her on Saturday. I'm like, hey, make sure you have 1/8 inch spikes. Ask your coach. She texts me back, okay. I'm like, hey, how does your ankle feel? She goes, not too good. Do you remember why it didn't feel good?
Oh, because I played volleyball.
Oh my goodness. Like, listen, I get this, and I know how competitive she
PE
is.
class.
Yeah, she
I
had
had
gym on
PE.
Friday. And she's like, I made a mistake. She goes, I played volleyball in gym. I didn't tell my gym teacher about my ankle. I'm like, man, this girl wants to win so bad. She has to spike some girl in volleyball the Friday before sectional. She couldn't take volleyball off on Friday. I was like, this is unbelievable, but this is so Ellie, right? So anyway, so now it's Sunday. She comes down to sectionals. And we had talked. We're like, we're going to do a 3, maybe a 4, maybe, okay? So she's doing warm-ups. She's doing her 3s. And if I'm being honest, I was kind of like, she's not really moving the poles that well. Like, we might need to go to a 4 to jump anything decent. So I go to her. I'm like, hey, like, you want to try a 4? No verbal response. She just kind of gave me that look like that. And I'm like, I guess her foot hurts a lot. I'm like, all right, we'll just stay at a 3. It's not a big deal. What now? Why don't you tell after that? What happens after that?
I think I opened at 9
Yes.
and I cleared 9.
Yeah, first attempt.
And then I wanted to talk to Bronco about going back to a 4.
Right, but wait. We jumped at 9.6 first. You blew through.
You said, let's just clear the next bar first.
Oh, you said that there. Okay.
So
okay.
then I went and I cleared 9.6.
Second attempt after a blow through. Yeah.
And I was like, Bronco, do you think I could beat this girl? Because it was me and one girl left.
Yeah.
I was like, Bronco, do you think I can beat this girl? She was like, from a 3?
I'm like, it's gonna be tight. Like, you can go 10, maybe 10.6, but that girl jumps 11.
And I was like, from a 4? Should we go back to a 4?
And I was like, well, does your foot hurt? And you're like, can I win? And I'm like, no, this is not how this works. Like, your foot either hurts or doesn't hurt, regardless of the fact of whether you can win or not. So, I mean, very, very competitive person. So that's why, I tell you, you have 4 years now, Division III college. I mean, definitely All-American. You got to be All-American.
I got it. I'll be disappointing you if I'm not.
You're not going to disappoint me. I might be sad, but I just want you to do whatever you want to do. But I'm telling you, you could definitely be All-American. That's for sure. But yeah, so I mean, I guess like for everybody that was just a recap, synopsis. If you get hurt, you got to keep training somehow. Whatever doesn't hurt, you got to keep training that. You got to slowly start doing the stuff that did hurt once it doesn't hurt. And even now, I mean, we were just talking about stuff that you need to start doing, you know, to make the foot feel better, ankle feel better, you know. Are there any closing statements you would like to add, Ellie?
Train harder.
Train harder. Yeah, that's good advice. You should train harder. And remember, train harder means a lot of different things. Maybe you need to focus on technique more. You can't go on autopilot during practice, as Ellie
I got
said.
very quiet those last 2 weeks before states at practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were very focused. Yeah. And then there's like the physical training. Then there's the nutrition. You got to make sure your nutrition's on point. As I discussed before, sleep is important, you know, and I think being competitive is important.
So I guess don't train harder, train different.
Well, yeah, but it is harder. It's all harder. And I think being competitive is important. Like we talked about today, because guys, I know everybody loves saying, "Oh, pole vault's so great because you don't really compete against anybody. It's you versus the bar." No. Why are you trying to jump higher? Why? Because you want to win the meet. And listen, why don't you slow-mo some of those videos you have? I'm sure you're going to see some of your competitors begrudgingly clapping sometimes when you clear the bar, or psyched when you miss. Yeah.
Some whooping and hollering when I missed 12-6 the last time.
Yeah, which, hey, listen, I get it. I'd be hooting and hollering if you cleared it, and I've been going crazy, right? So I definitely want to win, and I think it's important that you understand that. And I guess my closing statement about this talk is my biggest thing. Like, listen, I'm glad, you know, that you jump what you jump and that you're competitive. But what I'm most hopeful for is that you took the lessons of this like hard work, sacrifice, and discipline that you can now apply to the rest of your life. Because that's what's really important at the end of the day. I mean, like, look, not everybody's gonna be a professional pole vaulter. And even people who are professional pole vaulters are only professional pole vaulters for a short amount of time. And they do not make the money that an NFL or NBA player makes.
Yep.
You're not gonna be making $300 million as a professional pole vaulter, right? So it's like, you gotta learn these life skills. And I know sometimes we think about skills in a very specific way, like the skill of takeoff, you know, or I know how to computer program. But that idea of like sacrifice, discipline, you know, those are important skills. You can apply that to everything in life. All right. Again, if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend. Please subscribe on YouTube. It's just Apex Vaulting is our channel, or you can subscribe to Apple Podcasts. Leave a review, leave a comment. Follow us on Instagram at The Real Apex Vaulting, Apex Vaulting on Facebook and Twitter. And any comments or questions, please email us at apexvaulting@gmail.com. Thanks for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. Bye.